if you think about it, you can literally do anything you set your mind to, and there's nobody to stop you except for yourself. You know, like anybody who's out there that.
This is the How to Quit Working Show. Jeff Steinman believes entrepreneurship is the only true path to freedom. That's why he created the How to Quit Working Show, where you'll hear stories, insights, and inspiration from lifestyle fanatics who left their soul-sucking 9-to-5 job forever. Now, here's your host, author, entrepreneur, and ultimate lifestyle fanatic, Jeff Steinman.
Hello and welcome to the How to Quit Working Show. I hear so often from creative people who say, "Oh, I can't start a business with my photography because, you know, it's too hard and you have to be lucky and you have to be like a celebrity, you have to know somebody, this and that." All these ridiculous excuses for why you can't start a business with your creative talent. Well, I love having people on the show. Like, we've had so many cool artistic folks on and creative folks on the show who have totally debunked this, and we've got yet another one today. Richard Storm. He was working a job, and it just became, it sucked so much of his soul that he couldn't take it anymore. So he started his own photography business. He's gonna tell us about how he did that on today's show. And if you want to keep talking about it after the show, go over to howtoquitworking.com/group and join our Facebook group. It's absolutely free. Just click on Join Group once you get there, and we'll approve your request right away. And you can jump in the conversation with other amazing folks like yourself. You'll make some friends. You'll get some feedback. You'll give some feedback, and we'll all have a great time over there at howtoquitworking.com/group. Now, without any further ado, any further talking from me, let's talk to Richard Storm about starting a photography business. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you've got a really interesting business. You're a full-time photographer now with your own photography business, and I know a lot of folks have a hobby of photography or something like that they'd like to take full-time and they'd like to do as a business, but just can't figure out how to get there. So I look forward to getting some insights from you on the show about how to go about doing that. But first, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you started your photography business.
Okay. I started my photography business in March of 2013. Okay. So for 4 plus years prior to that, I had a desk job writing and doing graphic design work for a government auctions company.
Oh God, that sounds boring.
Yeah, it was honestly like it was just a kind of a weird job, but you know, without throwing anybody under the bus, it just got to the point where it was like I had to make a life and career decision, while the people in charge were kind of just, I don't want to say mistreating their workers, but it just got to like the point where everybody was butting heads.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Cool. So you're working that job and then you decided to make a big change. Tell us about how you went about making that change.
Okay. In November 2012, in August of 2012, I proposed to my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, but, you know, at the end of the year, thank you. Today's actually, our 1 year anniversary, so that's kind of cool. But, yeah, so it's like a big life change, and I was kind of looking at the landscape of where I was at the time, and I'm like, you know what, the job I'm at pays the bills. You know, it lets us go on vacation and have fun and do all this other thing. But it got to the point where, you know, my requests at the job were being stonewalled. The minor things that I wanted changed weren't happening. And it was a startup, you know, so I'm in direct contact with everybody who's higher up than me, and it just became like a really toxic environment. So I said, you know what, if things don't change, like after the new year, I'm going to start seriously consider quitting. You know, I'm just handing in my notice and kind of like doing something full time, you know,
like quitting with no plan.
Right. Yeah.
Excellent.
Which is kind of,
that's my favorite kind.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's what I know.
Awesome. Cool.
It works out okay eventually.
Yeah, eventually. But you know, there's that whole period of just kind of like, oh man, what did I do? You know? So, you know, like I said, I'm engaged now, job kind of is sucking the life out of me. I'm starting to get like really weird stress headaches and just like losing sleep. And I wasn't like a really friendly person to be around. So, I decided, you know what? March 1st, 2013, I handed in my notice 2 weeks prior to that. You know, finally, I kind of got through like a bunch of muck and, you know, just beginning of the year stuff with the company. And I finally gave them kind of like an ultimatum saying like, look, this is what I want. If you can't do this or are willing to help me out here, you know, I'm going to have to leave. And literally they just turn around and were like, okay, no problem. Thank you for your service. And I'm like, oh boy, you know? So the day I left my job was also the day I quit smoking, which was kind of big. And, I've been smoking since I was like 17 years old. And
how old are you?
You know, I'm 33 now.
Okay.
So, you know, for like a good chunk of my adult life, I was just smoking and being weird, you know.
So you gave up 2 terrible habits on the same day. One, smoking, and one, working a full-time job for somebody else. And quite frankly, I don't know which was worse for your health. It was probably about a toss-up.
I think, you know, honestly, when I look back on it, I'm like, you know what? It's kind of even. Like I was destroying my physical health and my mental health. So I just kind of, I gutted those 2 things on the same day, which was kind of cool. And I haven't looked back since, you know, and I always had a passion for photography, and I would do jobs on the side, you know, just like here and there, kind of like events or if somebody needed headshots. And, you know, I've always loved photography. I went to school for film and television, and it just kind of like I guess, I don't want to say it like this in a disenfranchising way, but it was one of those situations where like, you know what? I went to school for a certain thing and the real world happened, and I had to just get jobs, you know, to survive and do this and that, or jobs within the industry.
That's how most of us end up in our jobs that we hate.
You know, I decided to kind of take the bull by the horns and just jump into it and say, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I can probably make a viable career through this. And, you know, talking to my fiance at that point, just being like, listen, like it's going to be tough for a little while. So, you know, I want to make sure this is okay for the both of us. You know, as we're living together, we're planning a wedding, and, you know, knock on wood, she said, yes, you know, like, let's do this together, and, you know, I'll support you when you need it, and this and that, you know, like emotionally and whatever. So
cool fiance. Now, cool.
Yeah, super cool. And, so it was just kind of building a client base, doing work for free for a little bit, you know, and using my savings, using whatever credit I had at the time to buy new equipment or look into advertising, things like that, you know, and just really getting better at what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I look back at the stuff now, like a year and a half later, and I'm like, wow, that stuff is terrible. You know? So I think a big part of that whole process is the growth that you get from freedom. You know?
So you're saying your photography skills also improved?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow, okay.
By leaps and bounds, you know? So it's, you know, and I think that's a key point for anybody who's kind of wanting to do the same thing, is you really have to, it's a very much evolve or die kind of thing. Not to sound nihilistic, but, you know, in my situation, and I'm sure with a lot of situations of people who just decide to leave their jobs, it's, you know, like you have a family or you have bills to pay. Bills won't stop coming because you don't have a job, you know?
Sure.
The phone's not going to pay for itself. Cable's not going to pay for itself. You know, you're going to have to just really, I think that was the big impetus for me, is that this is a make it or break it kind of thing. You know, like I have to work super hard to not end up back at a desk where I don't feel I belong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been a pretty cool process, and, you know, it's getting better, as far as like my outreach goes, and, you know, even my work itself is, I'm glad I'm not, in the same mindset I was when I first started. You know what I mean?
Well, tell our listeners what you mean.
The stresses are different now, you know, whereas last year it was basically all about how could I it was almost subconsciously quantity over quality, you know? And I think that's a big thing that photographers run into, in general, you know? and at this point, I actually have a lot of contacts within the industry and a couple of people that I work with, and they all say the same thing. Like, they never know how to price themselves properly. And everybody has that kind of weird fear of losing a customer base, you know? So in the beginning, that's the struggle where it was, you know, you're almost like a carny barker where you're like, you know what, that guy said he could do it for 100, I could do it for $50 and I'll give you more pictures, you know? It's kind of like a weird mentality. And then eventually, you know, like I grew out of that and then, you know, it took months before I started kind of like realizing, really calculating through the trial by fire of, okay, this is how much work I'm putting in. This is the product. This is the outcome. This is what I'm using to get the outcome. This is the time I'm spending to either get to the location, to get the equipment, to do whatever it is. And I should be charging X amount of money, you know, in order to make like a sustainable income by doing this, you know, and that's a very, very steep learning curve, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like at this point, it's a little easier for me to say, hey, this is how much it's going to be. This is the process that I use. You know, and this is another thing. I'm sorry, I keep jumping back and forth between, topics or within the same topic, but, one of the major things, it's just like stuff popping into my head. One of the major things that, you know, if you have, like you said, if you have a lot of people who want to jump into photography full time, a big thing that I found is, a lot of photographers don't incorporate themselves or structure for tax purposes, structure themselves as a legitimate business, which I find to be, not the best idea. For example, like I'm talking to, another colleague who's, you know, he's been in the graphics business for maybe 20 years and he's jumping into full-time photography now. And I was talking to him the other day, and he's like, you know, guys like us, we have businesses, but we don't have businesses. And I'm like, yeah, I do, man. Like, I'm registered with the government. I have liability insurance. I have a business card, you know, like I'm trying to do things the right way because the bigger the jobs get, the more you kind of need that paperwork, you know?
Interesting. So you're talking about kind of like the practical reasons why you need to treat your business like a business. But these guys that say, yeah, we're kind of in business, but we're kind of not, they're not really thinking like they're in business. And do you think that is going to affect their ability to be successful in the future?
I can't attest either way because the photography business itself is a strange animal, you know. I consider myself more of a commercial photographer, you know, like I have corporate clients and I do certain things to generate income, you know, product photography. I'll do, you know, corporate headshots for, let's say, banks or, you know, Univision, for example. And there are other guys who just make their money selling their photography, you know, art prints, fine art prints, clays, things like that, you know, and your other fine art photographers who get grants to travel places and, you know, shoot wildlife or what have you, whatever project, you know, and they'll get funded a certain way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot and this is like a lot of this stuff, even 18 months after quitting my job and just doing this full time, a lot of this stuff is starting to seep in where I'm like, wow, you know what? Like there's so many different avenues to go. And I think it's ultimately up to the person. If you're the type of guy who's more of an artist and you're not that business savvy, or the biggest, I think at the end of the day, the biggest lie anybody could ever tell you is that the check is in the mail, you know? Mm. And if you're the guy who's still waiting for that check and trying to make a living doing photography, you might want to look into different avenues to explore your passion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be monetarily satisfying. It'll be, you know, it'll be satisfying for your soul to get your work out there. But, you know, I know guys who are still waiting like months on end for jobs that people keep saying like, oh, don't worry about it, I'll pay you, you know? And those guys create brilliant work. But again, they're more art photographers, and that's kind of like another tough nut to crack. And I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You raise a lot of really good points, but I think that the really key point that you brought up is that you treat your business like a business. You treat it like a business, and you recognize that there are certain things that you have to do in order to be successful in business.
Yes, 100%. And that's coming from like an interesting place too, because I don't have a business background, but I was fortunate enough to kind of open my eyes to a lot of things, especially from people in the past. Like I used to work for this mom and pop kind of retail store, and the owner of and this is when I was younger, and it kind of seeped in. Like the owner of the store treated his business like a Fortune 500 company. All the guys had benefits. He took care of everybody as far as, when tax season came. It was very structured, like surprisingly structured for that kind of retail business, and like through kind of like all the stuff I learned from that former boss kind of seeped in, and then combined with that startup mentality that I had at the other place I was working at, that I was writing blogs about, foreclosed homes for. There was a lot of independent research that had to go into that, because I was pretty much left on my own to be the social media guy, to be the graphic design guy, to be the guy who's cold calling people and, doing like all this legwork, So I think through my experiences, I got the mentality of, I need to do this a certain way. In a way that I could almost categorize exactly what I'm doing, and that's kind of what it evolved into, instead of, like I said, trial by fire, jumping into it 2 feet first, not really knowing what to do, and then saying, I kind of do know what to do. Let me see if I could do that thing, and there's so much that goes into it that it's like really, there's a lot, there's a lot of work on the back end, like people naturally assume, like, oh, you're a photographer. Cool. Like, how much, like, where are you shooting today? Are you on location? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Is it glamorous? Yes, at times it's pretty awesome, like, I won't lie. But that's
like, today I'm doing the bills.
Yeah, like 20% of the time it's the actual photo shoot,
Mm-hmm.
The other 80% is, networking, meeting the right contacts, building the website, making sure the SEO is working, the social media presence, which I find huge nowadays, and all the other back end stuff, like pay, you have your insurance, like how much are you going to rent a studio? Are you going to use a home studio? What lenses do you need? What camera equipment do you need? Are you going to, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Who's going to be the good? Who's a good person to network with? Who's the person that's just going to waste your time? It's all that back end stuff, and then that last glorious 20% of shooting and actually doing a project kind of makes it worth it, because all that stuff kind of comes to a head, and hopefully you end up with a good chunk of change in your pocket.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you the really tough question, Richard.
Sure.
How did you get clients?
Okay, so
you're like, all right, you need to take a deep breath.
Really, it's going to be another long-winded answer, probably. I'm sorry. I got really caffeinated.
Like depth.
Okay, cool.
We like depth on the show.
I can provide depth and at times a little density too.
That's cool.
So at first, I basically did work for free. I knew I had to build some kind of client base. I knew I had to build a portfolio, which is, your main thing. If you're going to be a photographer. So I would do jobs for free. I would put ads out, saying, hey, listen, get your headshots done or get this done or whatever. Like, I'll shoot your event. I'll shoot your party. As long as I can keep the pictures and use them on my website. So once I did that for about a month and a half, I started building my website itself and doing my own homegrown SEO, which I still do. Like, I'll put money into AdWords every so often, but it's just such a flighty thing that I do okay doing like digital ads and just my own SEO. So the more I built my portfolio and the better the work got, the more it kind of got attention from, let's say actors or models who said, hey, I like your stuff. You know, like, how much does this cost? How much does that cost? Like, what if I wanted headshots? So then I'd have to come up with a pricing plan, you know? And my pricing plan runs the gamut of different shoots you want, because I get requests all the time for like, oh, you know, like, I saw you can do headshots, but can you take a picture of this building? Sure, you know? So
Sure.
It's kind of interesting, you know, the way that works, how like that mentality that a potential client would have to say, you know what, like, I saw you took a bunch of pictures of sneakers and they look amazing. Can you get up on a roof and take a picture of a highway? Like, I get it's, you know, it's not, and I've done jobs for construction companies too, who just like saw my website and were like, this is excellent, man. Like, you're taking awesome fitness photos. Can you travel upstate and take pictures of a school for me? Yeah, sure. You know, whatever you want to do, as long as it's like, you know, as long as I'm not putting somebody in danger, and as long as like, you know, like it comes down to, like I said before, that calculation of how much am I putting into this and how much am I going to get out of it, you know? Yeah. Because there's also guys out there who like, you're in the Midwest?
I am, St. Louis.
Okay, you're in St. Louis. So, it's different in different, I think the coastal cities get like your LA and your New York, there's like so much competition for photography, you know? And, you know, like one of the bigger complaints that I always hear is, you know, like, why is that guy getting all the work? Because he's doing subpar work for a subpar cost, you know? Which is almost kind of, if you can equate it to like the contracting business almost, where like people more often than not will not go with the most high quality work. They'll go with the lowest bidder. Okay. You know, and, it's kind of rampant. So, but like, going back to my point, so I'd get my clients through my website, you know, I'd put out ads online, different places that kind of cater to photographers. I use a lot of social media. So, you know, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I've gotten clients through all that, you know, Craigslist even, you know, I'll just put ads out just in case. And I've actually landed a lot of corporate work through Craigslist, which is kind of interesting.
It's very interesting. You know? I didn't think they looked for work on Craigslist.
Yeah. I will never knock Craigslist because of that, you know, and I try to put up like generally professional looking ads, you know, like that I design myself or like that have good wording, you know, cause I know as a person, I'm gonna look at the ad that says, this is what you get, as opposed to the ad that says, hey, what about me? You want to try my service? It's great. You know, like just really like awful grammar.
Well, talk a little bit about that, because I think that's an important point there. Is so you're saying that there's good ways to do ads and bad ways to do ads.
Absolutely. If you, we're talking about Craigslist. We'll take that as an example. Okay. If you know your listeners are going on, and let's say you go on like creative services, where you know, most of the photographers like would put their stuff, you know, would put their stuff up. If you go through those ads, you will see that a lot of them are misspelled. There's no links. There's just nothing. There's no common sense to making your work attractive, you know? Like, I'm a photographer and I'm supposed to take pictures of something or a person and make them look their best. How am I supposed to do that if what I'm showing you about myself looks like garbage? You know?
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's like you have to kind of garnish yourself a little bit and make yourself like at least subconsciously, I think you have to make yourself as a photographer appealing to the senses, you know? I'm not saying you have to be a good looking person, but make your stuff look nice, and, you know, you can attract people that way. People love looking at like cool things, you know, instead of like just really awful grammar and, slang, you know?
Sure.
Just it's kind of weird, because like you want to land a corporate job, you can't walk into a guy's office talking, you know, like you've been living under a bus for 3 years.
Yeah.
Or a bridge, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, like I've gotten a good chunk of corporate clients through Craigslist, which always surprised me, you know, like doctors' offices, small networks, startups, tech startups, like a lot of places in the city, and you know, that has led to other work too, you know, which is a cool thing, you know, like the more, the business is cool because the more hustle you put into it, the more you definitely get out of it, you know, and it's a longevity thing because the guys who were doing the same thing when I started a year and a half ago aren't doing it now, you know. If you stick to your guns,
interesting.
Yeah, you know, like if you stick to your guns and just keep, if photography is something that you truly love to do and you stick to it, two things will happen. One, you'll just get better at it, and B, you'll be able to handle the business side of it better, you know? And you'll also, and I feel like you don't really have to worry about your competition because there's so many people in whatever city you're in. And there's so many things to do or dedicate your time to within the business of photography that I feel like there's plenty of money out there for everybody, you know?
I totally agree. And I'm really glad you made that point about money, but I'm also glad you made the point about, you said there were people that started when you did and they're not, they haven't made it. Why did you make it, but they didn't?
I don't know. I guess I stuck to my guns. Like I was saying, just because I knew that I couldn't, one, I knew I couldn't do anything else. Two, the marriage thing was weighing on me. So it kind of just made me work harder. Not to the point where I was burning myself out, but you know, I love what I do. I love photography. But I had that drive in me that was telling me, you know what, like you're really good at this. You can do it. You can just stick to it. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep making those good contacts, keep talking to the right people, you know, just whatever. I'm of the firm mindset of, if you want to do anything, you could literally do anything apart from flying or, you know, hopefully not murdering people, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But you could do anything, you know? Like, I was like, I put it in my head. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this full time, and eventually it's just going to get higher, bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, like the end game is doing those, at least for monetary, compensation, you know, like the end game is doing the bigger corporate jobs, to get to the point where, you know, I can do headshots for an entire company and make like a good chunk of money a day, or, you know, do something for a designer and, you know, kind of stuff like that. I'm not saying I haven't in the past. I have, you know, like I'm very fortunate to have worked with like a lot of different brands in the past year and a half, which is pretty cool. But, you know, there's always, I think, you know, you can always get better at your craft and you could always expand your horizons. And I think one of the major problems was the guys who started out at the same time I started had something else on the back burner. You know, they were going to school. They were going to move, you know, they weren't really committed to it. It's a shame. There's just a lot of guys out there who say they're photographers because they just want to take pictures of naked chicks, you know?
Oh, interesting.
Which is cool, you know, like who doesn't want to do that? But that's not a business model, you know, right. unless that person's end game is, you know what, I've built up a big enough portfolio, I'm going to try to shoot for Playboy or something like that, you know, like something along those lines, as opposed to like a guy who's just like, you know what, man, like I just want to see naked chicks all the time. Let me start taking pictures, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's all about your motivation, right? And that's probably not the right motivation to start a business, wanting to see naked chicks. But yeah, so this is really interesting. Tell us, Richard, what does success mean to you?
Oh boy. What does success mean to me? I think success means happiness. It's a lot. There's going to be a lot of levels to this. So,
cool. Go for it. That's what the show's about.
That's cool. If you're happy and you're doing what you love and you're not hurting anybody and your integrity is intact and you could see future growth with whatever you're doing, I think that is at least a modicum of success. You know, over the past year plus, like I've gone through a lot of, I think emotional is a strong word, but a lot of mental changes and just, my eyes have been opened to a lot of different things, and just, meeting an extreme group of different people, because like this business, you meet different people all the time, and that's cool, So at first it's, like depending on the kind of person you are, you could be like, you know what, I really don't want to deal with this person today. I don't want to deal with this type of person today. Or you could say, you know what, I'm just going to greet every day with, and it sounds so cheesy, I'm going to greet every day with a smile, and I'm going to make the best out of whatever situation I'm thrust into, and if this person, like, I know who I am, I know my own self-worth. If I meet somebody else who is a client or somebody on a job who's just the opposite of that, that's fine. It's not anybody's fault. Just, I think you have to take a breather with a lot of stuff. But that also ties into the notion of success, like personal success, like I feel like me personally, I feel like I've personally been more successful, just because of my outlook. And, just like because of the vibes I'm putting out, I guess. And I think business wise, like I know what my end game is. It's just a matter of getting to that point, So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you made a really important point about the vibes that you put out.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in, you want to, and again, like sometimes it sounds like, even coming out of my own mouth, I know it sounds like a little preachy, but there's a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of truth to being a nice person, a friendly person, and a kind person, and also a positive person. Like I don't think there's ever been a successful person who isn't positive, or at least doesn't have like a go get 'em kind of attitude. Like you can't be lazy. Your goal is to not only better your bank account, but to better yourself while you're doing it. There's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of habits, that I think people need to develop when they kind of branch out on their own, because life is, if you're working from home, which a lot of people I'm sure who listen to the show are, that your house is full of distractions, and you kind of have to like separate all the good stuff from the bad stuff, or like kind of, structure yourself like you were going to the office, except it's a job that you love,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Richard, what's the last piece of advice you want to leave our listeners with?
Let's see. It's another one. You may have to edit out the long pause right here. You are editing this, right? Or is it live?
No, it's not live, but I generally don't edit. It's okay to think about things.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think my last piece of advice is what I said before, kind of, like just if you think about it, you can literally do anything you set your mind to, and there's nobody to stop you except for yourself. Like anybody who's out there that is, and this is a big problem, I think, with people who just want to kind of break away or cut the umbilical cord, so to speak, with their conditioning of working, there's nobody there to stop you but you. And if there's anybody out there who's being negative or telling you can't do something, then you need to not silence that person, but just distance yourself from those vibes, because I've found that the people who tell you no are generally the people who can't see that in themselves, and that, I think that's top to bottom with anything, the people who say, no, you can't, are the ones who wish they could. And just, like I said, man, be positive and cool, and good things will happen to you.
Be positive and cool, and good things will happen to you. That's great advice. Richard, where can we go to get more information about you and your business?
Cool. You can, my website is nyphotony.com. You can find me there. You can shoot me an email at nyphotony@gmail.com, or I'm all over Twitter. Again, nyphotony. I'm all over Instagram with the same handle, and Facebook. It's kind of just like the one thing. And honestly, if anybody has any questions, if anybody just wants to talk, and, if I could help somebody with a little bit of positivity and even my a little bit of business advice or whatever, then, feel free to contact me, man. I love talking to people.
What a generous offer. NY Photo NY. We'll link that up. It's everywhere. Richard, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your hard-earned advice and lessons so generously, and I look forward to seeing what amazing things you do next.
Hey, Jeff, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Great advice from Richard Storm on starting your own photography business or any kind of business. You know, all the things that Richard said are applicable to anything you're doing, any kind of business you're starting. You know, this is episode, I think, 144 or something like that. And we've talked to these folks over and over and over again. And everybody keeps telling you, hey, all you got to do is believe in yourself and go do it. You're not going to get it right the first time, but just keep trying and you'll get it. It happens to everybody. So if you're still out there sitting on the fence, not starting your own business, I got to ask you why? What is holding you back? If you need some help figuring out why, what might be holding you back, go over to howtoquitworking.com/coaching and reach out to the certified How to Quit Working coach, Heather Osgood, and see if there's something that maybe we can do to help you to move on to the next level in your business. Because, listening to podcasts all day, it doesn't do it. Take some action. Go to howtoquitworking.com/coaching. Reach out to Heather and see if there's something that we can do to help you. We're going to do this again on the next episode of the How to Quit Working show. We're going to talk to another amazing person just like you who quit their job and started a business. And until then,
thanks for joining us on the How to Quit Working show. Tune in next time when we'll talk to another amazing person just like you who is now living the ultimate life of freedom and doing it on their terms. If you want to learn how to quit working and get these episodes delivered directly to you, visit howtoquitworkingshow.com.